Welcome to the Sisters in Crime Writers Podcast. Everyone has a unique writing journey, so join us for conversations about those journeys from the writers themselves. Hi, this is Julie Henricus, the Executive Director of Sisters in Crime, and I am delighted to welcome Laurie Robbins to the podcast this week. Laurie is the Amazon bestselling author of the On Point and Masterclass Mystery Series and a contributor to The Secret Ingredient, a mystery writer's cookbook. She's the recipient of 3 silver falchions, the Indie Award for Best Mystery, and a silver medal and the Daphne du Maurier Award for Mystery and Suspense. Short stories include Leading Ladies, which received honorable mention in the 2022 Best American Mystery and Suspense Anthology. She blogs with fellow crime fiction writers and misdemeanors. A former dancer, Laurie performed with a number of modern dance and classical ballet companies, including Ballet Hispanico and the St. Louis Ballet, but it was her commercial work for Pavlova Perfume and Macy's that paid the bills. After 10 very lean years on stage, she became an English teacher and now writes full-time. Her experience as a dancer, teacher, and mother of 6 have made her an expert in the homicidal tendencies everyday life inspires. Laurie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So we were talking a little bit beforehand about your really interesting background, but I want to start today the way I always start. When did you say to yourself, I want to write a book? And then let's talk about how you built that craft.
Sure. I think that anyone who's a really passionate reader and reads a lot at some point says, oh, I think I have a book in me. Mm-hmm. And it happened really years before I decided to write or decided to commit to doing that kind of a project. But actually, it was my youngest son graduated from high school, and everyone said, well, what are you going to do next? As if I did not have a full-time job. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to ballet and I'm going to write a book. And I just made up my mind that I was going to do that.
Wow. I want to talk about the ballet and what that takes, but let's talk about the writing a book. So you have this moment in your life. We all have many moments. We have this moment. It's like, all right, bucket list. Let's see if I can do this. How did you go about figuring out the craft?
A lot of trial and error, I would say. I think if you are a very passionate reader, you have and I was an English teacher, I think I had a pretty good sense of structure and character and things like a narrative arc. It's funny, though, because I think there was one book that set me off on the particular road that I began on, and that was Susan Isaac's After All These Years. And there was an outer borough English teacher of a certain age who gets involved in this murder mystery. And I was not just inspired by that, but I thought, I want to do that. I loved her sense of humor, and I found myself writing kind of in that vein. So I was inspired by it and also felt like it was something that I could do. So I ended up going down that route where I felt I could go. I wasn't going to write Moby Dick.
Well, because she wrote genre fiction and well-told genre fiction. And so to you, that felt possible.
Exactly. But I also think, getting back to where you started, it was a starting point for me. Mm-hmm. It was a way in. It didn't feel it felt like doable.
Yeah.
Her craft is very clear.
Yeah.
And I think she's just a terrific writer. So I guess that's kind of what got me started, although it took a pretty long time until I had a finished book in my hand.
And was it always going to be crime fiction for you? Always going to be a mystery?
It was always going to be crime fiction. And in fact, my first attempt at a book, I gave it to a friend who said, "Well, I feel like you have three different stories here. Is it going to be this, or this?" And I said, "Oh, no, it's the mystery that's the most important part of it." So I kind of extracted that story from all of the
Mhm.
rest of it, but didn't toss anything out. It's still waiting for me somewhere, those other parts of the book.
Well, that first book is about learning how to write a book. And somebody like Susan Isaacs can also be deceptive because it is clear and storylining and beats and all that kind of stuff. You can, as a writer, you can dissect it, but it's still hard to do.
Yes, she makes it look easy, and you find out that it isn't easy at all. And that was the road that I traveled. It looked easy. It turned out that it wasn't, but you do have to make it look that way. It has to unfold naturally, and the story has to sort of tell itself. I would say the other part of it is that it's very character driven, and that was the central
Mhm.
that's the central organizing force for me in my writing. I know it's crime fiction, and therefore plot is supposed to be the most important thing, but I always start with the characters. They're the ones who speak to me.
Mhm.
Those are the people who have grabbed my imagination, even though I have created them. They become real to you,
Yeah.
and interested to see what will happen to them next.
Um, I want to sort of go back to a conversation we were having before I hit record, and that is about your dance experience. Dancers are incredibly disciplined because your body is your instrument and it's constant pushing and training. And, it's not like you can set it aside for a while and come back to where you were. You have to build up and it's muscle memory. But it's also, I think, an interesting thing. You develop other muscles that are helpful in writing in that it's about the training for a dancer. You're hoping for a role. You're hoping to be able to use your training somewhere, but that's not why you're in the studio every single day, right?
No, you have to love it for its own sake.
Yeah.
And I do in my on point mysteries, there are some things that I repeat in book after book because it's important and it's central to the character. And really, I realize now that we're talking also to me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't miss class. You just don't miss class. And for me, it's the same thing. It was the same thing as a dancer. And honestly, it's the same thing as a writer. I don't not show up. I'm
Mm-hmm.
here. You know that there's no guaranteed payoff and things could end at any time. And that's the other part of it. The fragility of a career in dance, it's just one wrong step and that's it. You're
Right.
done. And luckily, I am sitting safely behind my desk at the moment. But the sense of importance and almost of urgency, you never get back an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's a very ordinary thing. You don't always feel like going to a ballet class, but you do. And then sometimes those are the days when you have the best class or you make some kind of a breakthrough. I find it's the same thing as a writer where I'm sitting in front of my computer and I'm thinking, well, I am not having a very productive day. And yet at the end of the day, I find that I've moved forward in ways that I hadn't anticipated when I began. So, yes, it's a sense of urgency and always an opportunity for something that you didn't expect.
Yeah, I love this. I also, I hope that listeners, you may never have thought about what dancers do and how they do it. But it is that constant stretching of your abilities. It's that slow progression. You don't just start and leap in the air and do things. You need to trust that this day by day and pushing and pushing and pushing is going to get you to where you want to go.
Exactly.
You're not going to be there from day one. Same thing with writing.
Yes, and that includes the times when you feel like you might be going backwards,
Mm-hmm.
but like but like you said, you have to trust that sometimes that's part of it. You need to make 5 wrong starts to a novel before you hit on the right one, and it isn't wasted time. It's just 5 things that you have now learned are not going to work for this particular book. So yes, there is that. You really have to um, I hadn't thought about it this way before, but you have to trust that in the process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And adapt your process to what works for you. So you could say, here are the 3 things that you have to do, or you would probably never say that. Here are the 3 things that I do in order to, show up and write. And those 3 things may not work for everybody, but find the 3 things that do work for you as far as making a commitment, developing craft, and doing the work.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I also am fascinated because, after a life and a successful career and being a teacher and everything else, it can be humbling to say, as your 6th duckling is flying the nest, to say, okay, I'm going to try this thing. Was that exhilarating? Was it scary? Was it both?
It was scary because I was putting myself out there. So for a very long time, I told myself that I was going to write a book, but I didn't say it to anyone else. And it was a scary, but it was also a commitment. I've said that I'm going to do this. A lot of people say, oh, I want to write a book, or I have it in me to write a book. Anyone who actually does it, I have so much respect for them. And I just thought that was my goal at the time, just to have a finished manuscript. I wasn't really thinking much beyond that when I
Mhm.
started, to be honest. I just wanted a book,
Yeah.
to write a book. It was scary because then, of course, people say, how's the book going?
Well, and also oftentimes will equate being published with success in writing, and they're 2 different journeys. So, that's part of it too. It's like, no, I'm just working on a book. We could deal with the rest of it later.
Yes, but that was my goal.
Yeah.
Yes, and I was very upfront about it. That was my goal. And if I didn't achieve it, then I would still have my book. But that that once I decided to write a book, I wanted to publish it.
Well, let's talk about that journey, but I also, towards what you were saying, there's a statistic I read that 3% of people who say, I want to write a book, actually finish that manuscript. So that in itself is an accomplishment, an achievement, and something to be proud of. And your first book, and especially that first draft, is just going to be terrible. So being comfortable with that is also a huge challenge, but it's part of the journey.
Not only was it terrible, but when my current publisher, and we'll talk about this in the whole publishing journey, picked up that series and then edited this first book, which had been published, I was astonished at how terrible it was and it had been published. Because, yes, you do learn a lot.
Yes.
And when I looked at it, I mean, it wasn't bad, but it was actually nice to get a second go at that one
Yeah.
and make it a book that I could be proud of now.
And you talked about characters coming at you. And I appreciate also that you mentioned, there's a conversation that mysteries are just about plot, or crime fiction are just about plot. And of course, that's a fallacy, because if you don't care about the characters, you're not going to care about what happens in a book.
That is the case for me. And I think for some readers, that's probably not true, because I see it's just I'm not a particular fan of those books. I'm always going to gravitate to books with interesting characters and people who fascinate, who interest someone, and not necessarily characters that I sympathize with,
Right.
but characters who engage me, who I want to know more about them.
Especially when you're writing a series, you got to have a cast of characters that can get you through the next book. They are going to keep people. It's a community. You want people to care about the community.
Yes.
So talk to me about your process. Your characters, but what triggers what I call a gravitational pull? How do you sort of, as you're thinking about the book, how do you say, oh, this is enough to be a book?
Well, once I do have, and I do write series, so I do have that cast of characters there. I have to think about how I want to kill someone, because there is a murder in every single book. And that is very difficult for me. Like, I do a lot of research about how to kill someone. And I think I was at BoucherCon and they were doing little video clips. And I just said, well, this is no spoiler alert. It happens in the first sentence or so. I just threw him off a building. It seemed like the easiest way to go. So aside from that, I start to think really about motivation. What would cause someone to do that? And so far, I've only written amateur sleuth mysteries, but I also think of them as amateur villain mysteries. These are not professional killers who we're going after. And to make that credible in my mind, and hopefully in the mind of my readers, I think about how you narrow a character's choices to make what is not very likely seem the only logical way to go forward.
Right.
And that's a central part of my plotting, or where I want to see what sort of awful, emotional, personal thing could happen to someone to bring them to that point. And I think that's the real challenge when you write those kinds of books. I mean, if you have a professional hitman or a mafia boss or the ever popular serial killer, they have their own reasons that we don't question. But for an ordinary person to commit an unspeakable crime is the challenge for the kinds of books that I write. And I do find it quite fascinating trying to get into that, the head of someone like that, and also what happens to them.
Yeah, what happens to them internally, and yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And because one of my series does take place in a ballet company, emotions are already running high. And your career is your life. I think that's a problem for not just in the dance world. Your professional career is short, fragile, limited. Some of the things that I've written that people thought were over the top weren't even close to reality. Like I could not even put it in. But I actually felt this as an English teacher also, that we value often the value we place on ourselves, the value we place with other people is what they do as opposed to who they are.
Yep.
I felt that so strongly as an English teacher, and luckily never had to edit the yearbook. That's, maybe a little bit too serious of an answer, but it's a very central problem, I think, right now, just kind of in our society, that
Yeah.
this is my worth.
Yeah.
So in a murder mystery, you just take that thing that we all buy into without even realizing it and put it up to another notch. Okay, I'm now going to threaten that thing that defines who you are. So it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, Laurie, I'm finding this fascinating because what an interesting way into your story is you're immediately going for stakes and goals and people's fears and everything else, and then you're figuring out what the story is that comes or drove that thing.
Yes, and then there are the daily little bites of envy, jealousy, fear, competition, all of those other things that are so enjoyable to write about, actually. I think my character at one point says something like, well, I have been insulted by ballerinas, both foreign and domestic. This was nothing.
But one of the interesting webinars on Sisters in Crime that I watched was, I think it was Patricia Sargent who did the webinar. It was about, what does your character want most in the world and what's in their way, right? So if what they want most in the world is love, but they don't trust people, that's in their way. And that conflict gives you tension. So everything you're talking about is tension, is what's behind the story.
Yeah, and that's really the best way to distill it. What do they want and what's in their way? Yeah, that's motivation enough.
I also was listening to what you said about society and how people define their worth. And when that is under attack, how they might react. And this is, I'm sure there are other countries where this is an issue, but in, American society in 2025, as we're recording this is a huge issue that, once people retire, and they're no longer doing what they did that gave them internal value, then a lot of times it doesn't, it's a struggle, or if they lose that position or everything else. Whereas when you're an artist, you learn you can't value yourself based on external validations. While those are helpful, you have to care the most from inside, and you have to figure that out. Because it's too hard to go forward if you don't, in my opinion.
Yes, I mean, even it's how we introduce ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first question. Oh, hi, this is Laurie. Oh, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there's a better introduction than that, but where you live, who your friends are, but
what you're interested in, what you've read, what you've watched. I just as a personal, I in my late 20s was unemployed for about 8 months, and it was at high, wedding going, shower going season, and I was okay with being unemployed because I worked in box offices, and I knew I'd find another gig or figure it out. I had faith in myself, but at all those events, when people said, what do you do? I didn't have an answer. At first, it was like, I used to, but then it's like, but I don't want to do that anymore. So now I have to figure this out. And that taught me then a lesson that I'm glad I learned. That's not what defines me. It can't be what defines me. There's more to me because I had to come up with pithy answers for all these parties. So when you're plotting your book or thinking about the idea, do you plot? Do you have this conflict and you get to the crime itself and then you figure out the journey? Or tell me about this, how you work.
I know who is going to be the first victim. That is right off the bat. I know who's not going to make it to the end of chapter 1. Beyond that, I'm open to whatever happens next. I feel like my central characters, and there are a whole, host of secondary characters, at least for these 2 series. There are a host of secondary characters who are going to appear at a greater or lesser extent. But I know who's not going to make it. I don't necessarily know who the second victim is going to be, but I let that come to me later. The setting is very important to me.
Mhm.
And not just this, I don't mean just the scene of the crime, but the particular milieu that, where we're going to be going, the literal places where we're going to be. I just wrote it's only in the first draft, my first suspense novel. And so that's a complete departure for me from what I have been writing. And again, in this case, it's a vanished sister. And the locations become extraordinarily important in the unfolding of this story. So I have no idea if I've answered your question at all. I just got very excited about writing this new book.
Well, I love that. So you're balancing 2 series, you're working on those, and then, you're writing a thriller, which is different.
I cannot tell you where it came from. The whole story came to me. Sisters are an important theme in my books, actually. And so it's the disappearance of a sister. And I'm very, very close with my sister who critiques all of the sisters in my books. So, but I do think there's something very, that relationship is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought of losing someone like that or in that way and all of the ramifications that would come afterwards. And it's a twin sister, so there's that sort of mirror image thing going on. Something about that story just grabbed me and I wrote it. I'm not even sure how even though it's finished, I know it needs a lot of work, but there was something about that story and that relationship between the 2 women that just grabbed me. And I think that's the most fun writing, when a story just says, hello, I've shown up and I would like to have my day.
You need to tell me, you need to tell the story. And you said it's a thriller?
Yes.
And which is different from mysteries and suspense. And there's lots of conversations about what that is. And folks can certainly use, you can look this up or talk to people. But a thriller has a ticking time bomb. Like we know something's gonna happen. The reader may know more than the characters.
Yes.
It's you're working towards that figuring it out at the end. Whereas in mystery, the author is playing games with the reader and trying to hide facts and trying to make them guess, but it's okay that the reader's in the dark. So it's a different skill set. And it sounds like I just see you lighting up as you're talking about this. It sounds like you're excited about taking on this new challenge.
It's so much darker. And I'm laughing and smiling at the same time that I'm saying, oh, it's so much darker than anything I've done before. But that's really the fun part of writing. That's every once in a while, you just sort of let yourself go and do something else. And so that's kind of where I am right now. Just figuring out, and yes, it's a very different skill set. It's
Yeah.
a different language. It's a different, structure of writing. Even the sentence structure is very different, very deliberately different. I have
Mhm.
a lot more short declarative sentences in this one than I would normally have in my writing. So it's been a nice way to stretch my writing muscle in my off hours of writing the stuff that I usually write. We'll see where it goes. I don't know.
And you said that the whole book came to you. When you write, I'm asking people this because I saw a friend asking this and I just wonder, but do you see scenes and then describe them, or do you see them after you write? Does that make sense?
It does. I would say that I definitely see them, and that's why my books are rooted in real places. I have no imaginary places. I always say if you go to Joe Allen's in the city for dinner, you can find the table that I've written about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and sometimes that can be bad because, it's New York. So when they moved the statue of Teddy Roosevelt from the front of the Museum of Natural History, I had to change my book. It was a meeting place.
And people will know, oh no, you can't take a left there.
No. I mean, I figured if worse came to worse, that people would figure it had been written before they
Yes.
moved the statue, but still, you don't want to make that kind of error. I definitely see the places, and it's usually a real place, and I might fictionalize some things about it. Um, I'm a serial eavesdropper,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of writers, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I I hear what they're saying. The conversations are um I don't think audible is the right word, but I like writing dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I'll definitely hear different voices from my different characters.
So another writer doesn't faze them. When you tell people who aren't writers or aren't creative in some way, that may faze them a little bit, which is why you need a community of other writers as you're doing things, because they don't bat an eye if you say, how would you kill somebody with this ball of twine? They'll come up with 10 things, whereas at a family dinner may not go so well.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the importance of community in your writing and your publishing, and then I want to talk about publishing.
Well, I have said, I'm pretty sure to you and to other people, in terms of community, the best move I ever made was to walk into my first meeting of Sisters in Crime. And I have to say that I don't want to anticipate, but this is very much connected to talking about my publishing journey, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, I had this first book published, and the publisher went out of business, and I was waiting. And I had written the second book in the series, and I was waiting to get my rights back, and I felt very lost, actually. I'd heard of this organization, Sisters in Crime, and it was pre-pandemic. We met at the Jefferson Market Library in the Village. So I'm very nervous to be around all these real writers and these accomplished people, but I show up anyway. And of course, it's Sisters in Crime. So everyone there is the nicest person you've ever met. And they all go out to dinner afterwards, and I tell them my story. And every person who looked at me said, so write something else? And I said, yeah, I guess I could do that. Start a different series. Like, yeah, of course. What else are you going to do? And I came home, and that's when I started my first On Point mystery. And by the way, probably all of the people, or many of the people who are sitting next to me, are now really my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
They've been wonderful. And that has continued all the way along. I feel like just a very supportive community. Everyone is writing, trying to write part of this crime fiction thing that we have going. And I've always felt welcomed.
There's many writing organizations out there, and everybody plays different roles, but Sisters in Crime also welcomes people no matter where they are on their writing journey. So even if you're sort of just saying to yourself, gosh, I really want to do this, join Sisters in Crime. It's self-serving because I'm the executive director, but because you need to find your community. Or a library, find your people, because that makes all the difference in the long haul.
Yeah, I often give workshops. Now I'm the person giving a workshop, and that's what I tell them all the time. Just join.
Yeah.
It's a really, I think it also just became, after the pandemic, I feel like Sisters in Crime really stepped up.
Mm-hmm.
Just went crazy with Zoom things and webinars and online stuff. And I think it kept people connected and engaged in a way, like it really right away stepped up. I'm all these years later, I'm still really impressed with how that happened.
Well, so I started my journey as in this role with Sisters in Crime during the pandemic, but they had already started to do webinars, because they'd been talking about this for years, building an online learning library and what that might look like. So they'd already started that. But then once the pandemic hit, it moved that forward. And also for the chapters, Sisters in Crime invested in a huge Zoom license, so each chapter could have a Zoom license as well. And I think that helped people on a micro level as well, so that a chapter could join or could meet or could do a write-in and build their community with that tool. And that continues. The world has changed so much because of the pandemic, right? We don't go out as easily or as often. I used to go to theater twice a week at least, and that's not true anymore. We all have changed.
It definitely changed things. But also, like, once we came back, I ended up meeting people. Well, I belong to several local chapters. And when I say local, I am never driving to the Upper Hudson Valley for anything. But I love this group of writers. So I'm a member of the chapter, and I'm involved with what they're doing. And at some point, I'll drive an hour or so, but that's it to get there. But again, that's enabled us to be part of communities outside of our local chapter. Mm-hmm. So that has been really nice as well.
I also love when you told that story about going to your first meeting and going out for dinner afterwards and having your very frustrating, I'm waiting for rights to be reverted. You run into roadblocks. This is an issue, right? And this is why people need help with contracts and figuring stuff out, so that when these things happen, that you can you can figure it out. But I love that the response was likely sympathetic, but also immediately a push forward, like, well, so you got to write something else. This isn't working out the way you expected, so you got to figure something else out.
I would say the number of years of experience sitting around that table was very impressive. I had experts there. They said, just giving me so much good advice and sharing their own stories and their own publishing journeys. And I guess you just find out that you think that once you've signed a contract, oh, that's it, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that it's ever that. That's what I'm learning. I don't think it's ever that.
No. It's a roller coaster, but you knew that from your dance background. I was in theater for a number of years on the admin side, but it's the same. It's a roller coaster. You're up, you're down, you're going backwards, you're excited, you feel like throwing up. I mean, it's not a ladder. It's like it's a ride. And I don't think we talk about that enough.
I have learned a lot just in the last few weeks, actually, from listening to my fellow writers. And again, in more casual situations like that dinner, as opposed to a presentation or a
Mhm.
workshop or anything, but hearing about how other people are navigating the publishing world, the business side of publishing, has been quite eye-opening. I learned a lot about writers who are still submitting proposals after very successful books
Yeah.
and very um, critical praise and all of that other stuff, still waiting to hear if the publisher wants the next book.
Hmm.
So that was sobering and instructive.
Hmm.
Yeah, very instructive. Just this is the publishing world that we live in now.
Yes, and it's changing. As is everything else in the world right now, but we are going through a time of tremendous change, which isn't easy.
Nope.
But there's also so many more ways to be part of the publishing world. Because indie publishing is a viable path, whereas 10, 15 years ago, it may not have been but now it's like, no, that's in the decision tree of how you want to proceed on your career. That's a path you can take. And, small publishers, getting agents. I mean, all of that are choices that lead you in different directions, but you're not stuck there. You've got to be willing to navigate.
I plan to continue my series self-publishing them
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of reasons. Part of it is just financially, I think it makes sense for me at this point to self-publish.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is I I want more control
Mm-hmm.
over the product. And I feel like this might be the right time.
Yeah.
I think this might be the right time for me to do that. So I definitely see that in my future. For my series anyway. They
Right.
have
Maybe pitching this thriller will be a different journey for you.
that is what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly what I'm thinking because it would be probably a different audience and a different I mean, you write under multiple pen names.
Well, there's so many reasons you do that. So as a thriller writer who also writes traditional mysteries, you may find a publisher who says we need another name, and that's one of the reasons. It's just so that they can reinvent or they can refine, or they may be. I think it would be great if you could keep writing under your name, but again, these are business decisions that you make on your own, or you don't. You make differently. But it's so indie publishing is not for the faint of heart to do it well in that you're running your own publishing house. You need likely to bring in some folks to help with the editing and the copy editing and covers and marketing or whatever else, because it's hard to do that all yourself on your own work. But you've published a lot of books now so that you understand it. But again, every time you do it again, you just got to pay attention to what it takes to do it well and to do it successfully.
Yes, and I also feel like after these books that I have the resources now that I wouldn't have had starting out. I know the cover artists that I think are doing a great job and that would be right for the book.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, we both know lots of wonderful editors through Sisters in Crime. And I haven't done it yet, but I'm hitting up those webinars on indie publishing and formatting and all the rest of it. So um, I'm sure I would not have been able to do much of a good job. But I also feel, tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like there are a lot of publishing houses, they don't do much in the way of marketing. So if I'm doing, like, that's the part that if we're doing all of that ourselves, like marketing the book,
Mhm.
I almost feel like the rest of it I could probably figure out, that just getting your book out there, marketing, and that's the control part that I was thinking of, just
Mhm.
in terms of price points or when it releases. Um, yes, I am feeling, as you can tell, a little bit like I want more say over my book.
Yeah. It's also delivery systems are changing as well. In that mass market paperbacks aren't not as many books are being published in the mass market paperback. So when you're indie publishing, it tends to come out and trade, but that people are used to that format now. Also, e-readers offer flexibility on price points, and you can get audio books done, and audio is just flying. I mean, it's soaring with how many people are doing that.
Yeah, I mean, my eyes are not great. So I am, even though I still read actual books, but I am addicted to my Kindle when I leave this house.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Make them the fonts, when at the end of a long day, you
yes,
have the 16-point
exactly.
font, so that you can read the book.
Yes. Or if you just, you're traveling,
Yeah.
I cannot say that a lot of hotel rooms I've been in have the kind of lighting that my eyes require at night. So yes, that has made changed reading a lot, I think.
So you are navigating and you're figuring things out and you're using your network of experts, and it's great that you are a mentor to some people, and then you're being mentored by others who are a little bit further down the path that you want to go on, because that's what makes all the difference, is talking to people about their journey.
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so. Yeah. And I also, from what I've read and I've heard, and I've attended a lot of our sister in crime, presentations, particularly when it comes to indie publishing. I do feel like I've learned a lot, but I'm understanding how different genres work in the
Mhm.
indie publishing world and what seems to be more successful than others, which is why I was thinking my series books, because they do seem to benefit from series more than a standalone thriller, perhaps. So,
Well, and having written a standalone thriller, and once you've worked on it and you've done the work that you want to do and you figured stuff out, why not try a different path and then know that you can do what if that doesn't work out, you can definitely publish it yourself, but who knows what can happen.
I'm very excited to find out, actually.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. I love this conversation. And as we're talking about, because we've hit on so many of the things, and again, the discipline of being a dancer is incredible. And I also love that, well, I loved a couple of things in your bio. One, that, commercial work paid the bills, when you're a dancer. And of course, I am going to go on YouTube and see if I can find anything, but I love that conversation, which I think we need to have also, because we don't pay artists enough. That you got to figure stuff out. And if you got a commercial gig that's paying the bills, I knew very talented actors who, if they get a national commercial, they are dancing because that's a paycheck for a while, or if they do voiceover work or something that can help pay the bills.
Yes. I mean, for me, it was Pavlova Perfume. And it was so long ago that it wasn't actually Macy's. It was Macy's Bambergers.
Oh,
So they would run it during Christmas time.
yeah.
If you find it, you have to tell me because I cannot find it. I can't find it on YouTube. I have a recording of it at home, but it's on like a VHS tape, so I don't even know how to run it.
You may want to
yes.
digitize that and, put it out yourself. I found a Burt Parks video from 1976 when he was doing a Wings song at Miss America. So everything is out there. You just know what to look for. And so what would you tell? And that I love that once you're sort of in this phase, you still go back to the studio. You're still dancing. You're still, going through that discipline and training. You're challenging yourself by writing a different book. What would you tell the earlier career person, that you've learned over this life of creativity, that sort of can help them be part of the 3% who finishes that manuscript?
I did not know when I started out about any of the business side of publishing. I thought that I would write a book and then someone would sign a contract and buy the book, and then my work was done. I had no idea about the before, during, and after part of writing a book. And I'm still learning about that, I feel. I'm not a huge fan of social media, but I have seen the value in it. I am essentially can be a somewhat introverted person, but I've gone to conferences and made amazing connections, learned a ton. Those sorts of extracurricular activities, if you will, have paid off 1,000 times over. I didn't know that when I started writing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I meet someone who hasn't yet published a book or hasn't finished a book at a conference or at a Sisters in Crime meeting, I tell them that, boy, you are really going about this the right way. I wish I had done that.
Mm-hmm.
That during all that time that I was trying to write a book, that I was also reaching out in these other ways, because I think I would have gotten there faster, and it would have just been a more enriching experience getting there, not so lonely.
Yeah. Yes. Writing is lonely, but writers don't have to be. You can find people.
Yes. So I wish I had known that. I'm so in awe and envious of people who I meet who haven't finished a book and are at the conference. They are at our meetings. They did show up. And I think, wow, you figured that out. That's pretty good.
Or going to a library event or going to a bookstore event and supporting writers, being part of the community that way, you're just paying it forward. I mean, it's just, it's such a great way to just meet people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People like you.
Yeah.
Right? People for whom reading and writing is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Like that's what they care about. What better place to meet people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Laurie, this is a great way to end a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much.
June, thank you so much for inviting me. I've had a great time. Thanks.
Thank you for being with us today. Sisters in Crime is about community. We were founded to advocate for women crime writers, and we continue that mission by fighting for equity in the crime writing community. Sisters in Crime is an international, inclusive organization for all who write and love crime fiction, mystery, thrillers, and suspense. Join us at sistersincrime.org and make sure you subscribe to this podcast.